It's time. I know. The car will be here in 20 minutes. Marcus thought it would be easier if... Marcus, I have my own car. You knew. Did you need something else, Diane? Settlement offer is generous. I want you to know that. I'm sure it is. Excuse me.
Elena.
Is the front door unlocked?
Yes, but I didn't want it to happen like this.
The suitcase was already packed. That is the detail no one in the Voss family thought about afterward. Not Marcus. Not his mother, Diane. Not the two cousins who stood at the bottom of the staircase watching like it was a performance staged for their entertainment. The suitcase was already packed neatly, precisely the way Elena did everything before Diane Voss ever knocked on that bedroom door. That should have told them something. It told them nothing. They were too busy celebrating. Elena Voss walked out of the house she had lived in for 6 years, carrying one suitcase and wearing a coat she had bought herself on the day she got her first promotion. She did not cry. She did not turn around. She did not respond to the thing Diane called after her from the front door. She got into the car she had ordered 40 minutes before they came upstairs. She had been ready. The question no one thought to ask, the question that would keep Marcus Voss awake for the rest of his life, was simple. How long had she been ready? Elena had not always been quiet. There was a version of her, a younger version, before the Voss family, who laughed too loudly in restaurants, who argued with strangers on principle, who once spent 3 hours in a city council meeting fighting for a rezoning decision that affected people she had never met. That version of Elena was still there. She had simply learned, over 6 years inside the Voss world, that loudness was a luxury she could not afford. She had met Marcus at a fundraiser for a children's literacy organization she had helped establish. He was there because his company had donated. She was there because she had built the program from a folding table and a second-hand printer in a rented office space. Marcus had walked across the room to introduce himself. Elena had shaken his hand and gone back to her conversation. He came back 3 more times that evening. She remembered thinking he was persistent. She had not yet learned the difference between persistence and entitlement. They dated for 14 months before he proposed. Elena had been cautious about the relationship in a way she could not fully explain at the time. There was something about the way Marcus changed when his family was in the room, a subtle flattening, like a man who had learned to make himself smaller in certain company and had stopped noticing he was doing it. She mentioned it to him once, gently, early in the relationship. He laughed and told her she was overthinking. She filed it away. Diane Voss had made her position clear at the first dinner. Not with words, Diane was too careful for that. With seating. Elena had been placed at the far end of the table, between Marcus's teenage cousin and an empty chair. Marcus sat at his mother's right hand, the way he had sat since childhood, and he did not seem to notice the arrangement. Elena noticed. She smiled across the table at Diane and made a note. The marriage itself had been, in many ways, genuinely good. Elena had loved Marcus, or the version of Marcus that existed when they were alone, when his family's voice was not in the room with them. He was thoughtful then, careful, the kind of man who remembered small details and acted on them without being asked. But the Voss family was rarely absent for long. Diane called every Sunday morning. Marcus took the call in the kitchen, standing up, the way a person stands when they are being reviewed. Elena would hear the low murmur of his responses through the wall. "Yes, Mother. Of course, Mother. I'll look into it." She never asked what was being discussed. She already knew she would not be told. In the 3rd year of their marriage, Elena had started building something quietly, the way she had always built things, without announcement, without permission, without an audience. She had identified a commercial property on the eastern edge of the city that the market had undervalued. She bought it through a holding company, registered in her name alone. Within 8 months she had 3 tenants and a rental income that exceeded her monthly salary. She did not tell Marcus. Not because she was hiding it from him, at least not at first. She had simply learned, by then, that the things she built alone survived longer than the things she built with his family watching. 18 months later, she had acquired 2 more properties. The second one, a converted office building on Merchants Row, had a tenant she recognized immediately when she reviewed the lease agreement. The tenant was a subsidiary of Voss Holdings. Elena had sat with that information for 3 days before she decided what to do with it. She decided to do nothing. She renewed the lease at the standard rate. She sent the paperwork through her holding company's management firm. No one at Voss Holdings knew who their landlord was. She made a note of that too. The conversation that ended her marriage did not begin as a conversation. It began as a Sunday lunch. Diane had called the previous week to say she would be visiting with Marcus's uncle Raymond and his wife. A family lunch, she said. Nothing formal. Elena had cooked for 4 hours. Not because she was trying to impress anyone. She had stopped trying to impress the Voss family somewhere around year 2, but because she believed, in some private part of herself, that there was still a version of this family she could reach. That the right meal, the right afternoon, the right sequence of small moments might eventually build something resembling warmth. Diane had arrived 45 minutes late and commented on the table setting before she sat down. Raymond and his wife had been pleasant enough. The conversation had moved through familiar territory: Marcus's business, the family's investments, a property development Diane was overseeing near the waterfront. Elena had listened more than she spoke. That was her habit in these rooms. It was after dessert that Diane set her glass down with a particular kind of precision, the precision of a woman who has rehearsed what she is about to say, and looked at Elena directly for the first time that afternoon. "We've been having some conversations," Diane said, "as a family." Marcus was looking at the table. That was when Elena knew. "Marcus has a great deal ahead of him," Diane continued. "Responsibilities, opportunities that require a certain kind of partnership, a certain kind of presence." Coast. Raymond cleared his throat and looked at a point on the wall behind Elena's head. His wife reached for her water glass. "We've come to feel," Diane said, "that this marriage has run its course." There was a silence in the room that had texture to it, thick and deliberate, like something that had been planned. Elena looked at Marcus. Marcus looked at the table. "I see," Elena said. "It's nothing personal," Diane said. "You are a capable woman. You will be fine." Nothing personal. Elena thought about the dinner 8 years ago, where she had been seated beside an empty chair. She thought about the Sunday morning phone calls and the way Marcus stood up to take them. She thought about the lease agreement on the Merchants Row property. She thought about the holding company. She thought about the suitcase upstairs, which had been packed for 11 days. "When?" Elena asked. "We think it's best if you begin transitioning out of the house by end of the week," Diane said. "Marcus's legal team has prepared an initial settlement proposal. It's fair." Marcus had still not looked up. His legal team. Not their legal team. His. Elena stood up from the table. She collected her glass and Marcus's glass and carried them to the kitchen. She stood at the sink for a moment with the water running. Then she dried her hands, walked upstairs, and brought down the suitcase. Diane had watched her come down the stairs with an expression that was almost satisfaction. "You don't have to go tonight," Diane said, with the graciousness of a woman who has already won. "I know," Elena said. She put on her coat. She picked up the suitcase. She walked to the front door. "Elena," it was Marcus, the first time he had spoken directly to her since the lunch began. She stopped. She did not turn around. "I'm sorry," he said, and for a moment, just a moment, she believed he meant it. She opened the front door and walked out. The car she had ordered 40 minutes ago was at the curb. She got in. She did not look back at the house. She had 11 days ago stopped thinking of it as her house. The apartment Elena moved into was on the 14th floor of a building she owned. not the holding company, her, personally. A building she had acquired 2 years ago that the Voss family's own financial advisors had passed on as undervalued. She had bought it within a week of their decision. She took the corner unit, 2 bedrooms, floor-to-ceiling windows facing east. She had kept it vacant for 8 months, the way a person keeps a room ready without fully knowing why. She unpacked the suitcase on the first night methodically, the way she had always done things, clothes first, then the locked interior compartment. Inside the compartment was a brown envelope she had been adding to for 8 months. She set it on the kitchen table and made herself a coffee. Then she opened it. The first document was the deed to the Merchants Row property, the one whose largest tenant was a Voss Holdings subsidiary. 3 years of lease payments. Elena's holding company had received every one of them. The Voss family had no idea their landlord was the woman they had just removed from the family home. The second document was a lease summary for the second commercial property, also a Voss tenant, also unaware. Combined, the Voss family had been paying Elena Voss through corporate structures. They had never investigated approximately $47,000 per month for the last 31 months. She had never spent a cent of it. It was sitting in a dedicated account, earning interest, waiting. The third document was a printed transcript. 8 months ago, Elena's personal assistant, a careful, loyal woman named Grace, who had worked with Elena for 4 years, had been in an adjacent office when Marcus took a call from Diane on speaker. Grace had not announced herself. She had listened. Then she had written down what she heard, word for word, and sent it to Elena that evening with a one-line message. I thought you should know. The call was dated 8 months before the Sunday lunch. In it, Diane had outlined the plan precisely, the timing, the framing, the settlement offer, which Marcus's legal team had apparently been preparing for 7 months. The property in Marcus's name that would be offered as part of the settlement, a property that Diane had quietly transferred out of the family's joint holdings before the marriage had legally begun, making it untouchable in any standard divorce proceeding. Marcus had listened to all of it. Then he had said, "Yes, Mother. Of course, Mother. I'll look into it." Elena read the transcript twice. Then she put it back in the envelope with the deed and the lease summary and a third document, a letter printed on the letterhead of Callaway and Associates, the Voss family's own legal firm. The letter had arrived at the Voss house 6 months ago. It had been addressed to Marcus. It had been opened a small tear at the corner of the envelope that suggested hurry, not care, and then placed with a stack of household mail that the housekeeper had sorted. Elena had found it on a Tuesday afternoon. The letter was from the firm's senior partner. It outlined the full structure of Diane's asset arrangement and confirmed that Elena's name appeared nowhere in any of the family's protected holdings. It also noted, in a paragraph near the bottom, that the firm had conducted a standard background asset search on Elena Voss as part of their preparation. The search had returned nothing. Elena had read that line 3 times. Their lawyers had looked for her and found nothing because everything she had built was under her holding company's name, registered in a state she had chosen specifically for its privacy protections, managed through a firm that had no visible connection to her personal identity. They had looked directly at her and seen an empty chair. She closed the envelope and finished her coffee. Then she picked up her phone and called her own lawyer. X. The Voss family's first indication that something was wrong came not from Elena, but from their property management company. 3 weeks after Elena had left the house, a formal notice arrived at Voss Holdings' registered address. It was from a property management firm they had never heard of, representing a landlord they had never met, regarding the commercial lease on the Merchants Row property. The notice informed them that their lease would not be renewed at its current terms. The new terms effective at the next renewal date, which was 41 days away, included a 40% increase in monthly rent and a revised exit clause that reduced the standard break period from 6 months to 30 days. Marcus's operations director had called the property management firm to negotiate. The firm had been polite and immovable. The landlord's instructions were clear. It was Marcus's finance director who first noticed the holding company's name on the documentation and ran a deeper search. He brought the results to Marcus on a Thursday morning and set them on the desk without a word. Marcus looked at the search results for a long time. Then he called his mother. Diane did not believe it at first. She called Callaway and Associates. The firm ran their own search and called back within the hour. Elena's holding company was the registered owner of both commercial properties the Voss family leased. It had been their landlord for 31 months. The combined rental income paid to Elena's company over that period was just under $1.5 million. The same holding company also held a minority stake, 12%, in a logistics firm that processed a significant portion of Voss Holdings' regional distribution contracts. It had been acquired quietly 18 months ago through a series of purchases that had registered as institutional trades. Diane called Marcus again. Marcus did not answer. He was already in his car, driving to the address his assistant had found for Elena's holding company's registered agent, because he did not have Elena's new address. And he had only just realized that he did not have her phone number either. She had changed it 2 weeks after she left, and no one had told him, because no one in his life knew her well enough to have noticed. He sat in the car outside the registered agent's office for 40 minutes without going in. Then he drove home. The meeting happened on a Wednesday. Elena's lawyer, a woman named Isabel Chen, who had represented 3 of the city's most significant commercial property disputes in the last decade, requested it formally through the Voss family's own legal team. The meeting was held in a neutral conference room at a law firm neither side used. Elena arrived 5 minutes early. She wore the same coat she had been wearing when she left the house. She sat at the center of the table and arranged her notepad precisely in front of her. Marcus arrived with his mother and 2 lawyers. Diane looked at Elena across the table with an expression that had shifted not into guilt, not quite, but into the particular stillness of a woman reassessing a situation she believed she had already resolved. Elena looked back at her calmly. Isabel Chen opened the meeting. She outlined the holding company's ownership of both commercial properties and presented the 31 months of lease receipts. She presented the 12% stake in the logistics firm and its contractual relationship with Voss Holdings. She presented the transcript of the phone call dated 8 months before the Sunday lunch, in which Diane had outlined the plan to remove Elena from the marriage and the family home. She then presented a copy of the letter from Callaway and Associates addressed to Marcus, confirming that their own firm had conducted an asset search on Elena and found nothing. There was silence in the room. One of Marcus's lawyers cleared his throat and began to speak about the admissibility of the recorded transcript. Isabel Chen acknowledged his point and placed a second document on the table, a filing made 3 weeks earlier with the relevant regulatory authority, which had already been acknowledged and entered into the preliminary record. The lawyer stopped speaking. Diane looked at Marcus. Marcus was looking at Elena. "What do you want?" he said. His voice was different from the one she remembered, smaller, the way he got when his family was in the room, except this time, the smallness was not deference. It was something else. Elena picked up her pen. She wrote 3 numbers on her notepad and turned it to face the center of the table. Her lawyer spoke for 11 minutes. She did not speak again during the meeting. She did not need to. The settlement was finalized on a Friday. Elena did not celebrate. She had dinner alone at a restaurant she liked, near the apartment on the 14th floor. She ordered what she wanted and ate slowly and watched the street outside. Grace, her assistant, sent a message that evening, just 3 words. "How are you?" Elena thought about it for a moment. Then she typed back, ready for what's next. She left the restaurant and walked home through the evening air, the coat buttoned against the cold, the city moving around her the way cities do, indifferent, continuous, full of its own business. She had not wanted this outcome. That was the truth she allowed herself on the walk home, the truth she did not say in conference rooms or to lawyers or to anyone who might interpret it as weakness. She had wanted a marriage. She had wanted the man she married, the one who came back 3 times across a room because he could not help himself. She had wanted the family lunch to be what family lunches were supposed to be. But she had learned, somewhere in the middle of 6 years, that wanting something does not protect it, and that the only thing she had ever been able to fully rely on was the quiet, precise, unglamorous work of building property by property, document by document, lease by lease, something no one could take from her. The suitcase had been packed for 11 days. She had hoped she would never need it. She had made sure she was ready if she did. There is a kind of strength that does not announce itself, that does not need an audience or a dramatic moment or a room full of witnesses to be real. It simply exists, patient, accumulated, waiting like interest in an account no one knows about. Diane Voss had looked across a lunch table at Elena and seen an empty chair. She had been looking at the wrong thing. Some people leave a room quietly. It takes a while to realize the room left with them.